boys and girls, and welcome back to my classroom here at Sequoyah Elementary. I hope that you're all having a great week and that you've been out enjoying the beautiful weather we've been having. Today, we are going to talk about some social studies and science together. The last couple weeks, I've been talking to you about people of the past. And today, we're going to talk about the past, but not necessarily about certain people, but about a certain landmark that we have here in America. So, first of all, I want to talk to you about what a landmark is. So a landmark is an object or feature of a landscape or town that's easily seen and recognized from a distance, especially one that enables someone to establish their location. So something that you see and you instantly go, oh, that's in such and such place, or that's this certain landmark. You know it just from seeing it. So, for example, maybe you see the president of Mount Rushmore, and you think, oh, wow, I know right where that is. That's in South Dakota, because that's where Mount Rushmore is. Or maybe you see a picture of the White House, and you associate that with the president and Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Or maybe even locally, you see the blue whale when you're out driving, and you know that you're on Route 66, and you're in the Catoosa area. Okay, those are all landmarks. So today we're going to talk about a special landmark that I think a lot of you are going to recognize, but maybe you're going to learn something new about it. Something else we're going to talk about is symbolism. Symbolism is the practice or art of using an object, like a landmark, or a word to represent an abstract idea. So for example, maybe a heart. If you see a heart, what do you associate a heart with? That usually symbolizes what? Maybe love, or Valentine's Day, or affection, that you really like something, you put a heart. Okay? Another symbol that we see a lot is the American flag. And that can symbolize lots of things, like the United States, or freedom, or sometimes the 4th of July, or Memorial Day, patriotism. All those things are symbolic. And so today we're going to talk about a national symbol that's also a landmark in our country. Another word that you're going to see today or hear today is immigrant. And an immigrant is a person that comes to live permanently in a foreign country. So like you all live in the United States, but if you decided to move away and you wanted to live in another country like Japan, or maybe you want to live in Germany, you would become an immigrant by moving to another country, even though because that's not the one where you were born. And then the last word I want to talk to you about before we begin our book is liberty. And liberty is the state or condition of people who are able to act and speak freely. So thinking of freedom. And we have liberty in the United States because we can have freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and all those freedoms that we enjoy are because of liberty. All right. So this morning, the book I'm going to be reading you is going to take place in 2 different cities. The first one is Paris, and Paris is located in Europe. Okay, it's over in France. And then we're also going to be talking about New York City, which is in the state of New York, which is located in the United States. And they're separated by a body of water, which is the Atlantic Ocean. All right, so does anybody have any guesses what landmark we might be talking about today? If you had guessed the Statue of Liberty, you would be correct. So I'm going to be sharing a book with you today called Her Right Foot. And this book is by Dave Eggers, and the art in it is very unique. I want you to watch the art in it today. It's really neat. Just a few colors, but the way he does his artwork makes it look almost 3-dimensional. And it's by Sean Harris. I'm actually going to take the little book jacket off because it makes it kind of hard to hold. All right. So let's see if you learned something new about the Statue of Liberty today. You have likely heard of a place called France. If you've heard France, you may have heard of the French. They are the people who live in France. You may also have heard of something called the Statue of Liberty. Have any of you ever been to the Statue of Liberty? I've been close. I haven't been inside the Statue of Liberty, but I've been in the water around the Statue of Liberty. It's very cool to see. You can see it from a long way away. Did you know that the Statue of Liberty comes from France? This is true. This is a factual book. So if this is a factual book, does that mean it's fiction or nonfiction? It would be nonfiction, because that means that this is a book full of facts. One day, a Frenchman named Edouard de Labaleye had an idea. The idea was to celebrate the 100 years the United States of America had been around by giving them a giant sculpture. So he convinced another Frenchman, a Frenchman with an Italian last name, to design the sculpture. This artist's name was Frederick Augusta Bartholdi. Bartholdi designed the statue. He first made very small models of the sculpture, then larger ones, and finally one that is the one we know, which stands 305 feet above the water. This final, full-size version was covered with a thin copper skin. The skin is about as thick as 2 pennies. That's not very thick. I have a couple of pennies to show you. 2 pennies is only this thick. That's not very thick. It's a very thin layer on the outside that's covered in copper. Here is a rendering of Bartholdi and his team. He had a team. He did not work alone. He did not like working alone, constructing the statue's hand. Notice the hand is bigger than the men. Thus, they made the statue in many parts. These parts were assembled in New York City. No, wait. First, they were assembled in Paris. Did you know this? Ask your friends and even your teachers if they knew before the Statue of Liberty was assembled in New York, she was first constructed in Paris. Your friends and teachers will be astounded. They will be impressed. They might think you are fibbing, but you are not fibbing. This really happened. The Statue of Liberty stood there high above Paris for almost a year in 1884. After they got it all assembled in Paris, they took it apart. But we just put it together, the workers said. That is absurd, they said. They said all of this in French, the language of the French, a people who appreciate the absurd. So you can see him sleeping on the crown of the statue. In 1885, after they took it apart, they put the parts in 214 crates and put these crates on a boat. The boat was called the Saray and made its way to a city called New York, which is in a state also called New York. Hundreds of workers, perhaps 214 of them, took the pieces out of the 214 boxes, then began to rivet the pieces together. Assembling the statue took 17 months, and it all happened on what was then called Bedloe's Island. Bartholdi liked to see the sculpture rise above the harbor. Sometimes he watched the construction from the water. Sometimes he watched it from the land. Usually he was wearing a sturdy black hat, for he, like most European men of the time, favored sturdy black hats. Okay, I'm going to show you real quick another map that I have. And this one shows New York. New York is kind of like a peninsula down in the Hudson Bay here. And you can see this is a lot of landmarks that we have today in New York. Those wouldn't have been around in the 1880s. But you can see things like Central Park and the Chrysler Building and Empire State Building and Times Square and Madison Square Garden. Lots of things that you might recognize. But the Statue of Liberty is way out here. It's on its own little island right outside of New York City. And that's where they constructed it. There was nothing there. You may have noticed by now the pictures of the Statue of Liberty in this book have her colored brown. You may have thought the illustrator of this book was not so good at his job because we all know the Statue of Liberty to be a certain greenish blue. But the Statue of Liberty was made of copper, and copper starts out brown. Then very slowly, when left outside for long periods of time, copper will eventually oxidize. And when it does, it turns this blue-green color. At the end today, I'll kind of show you a picture of what the Statue of Liberty would look like if she had not turned this blue-green color, if she was still copper. So the Statue of Liberty that everyone in New York saw being constructed was actually brown. The Statue of Liberty, in fact, was brown for about 35 years. The statue turned green around 1920 and has been this color ever since. Perhaps you already knew this. And you may have known that the book the statue is carrying, the one in her left hand, features the date July 4th, 1776, on which the Declaration of Independence was signed. And you may know that the 7 spikes on her crown represent the 7 seas on Earth, and the 7 continents, and the sun's rays, too. And you probably know that the torch she carries is a symbol of enlightenment, lighting the path to liberty and freedom. And I thought this was very interesting. I didn't know this, but you might have. And you might have known that at one point, Thomas Edison, inventor of the light bulb and the record player, remember we talked about record players last week, he once proposed to have a giant record player put inside the Statue of Liberty. He did. He wanted the statue to be able to speak. In the end, though, this idea was considered a bit strange and was not pursued. Can you imagine if there was a record player inside? That'd have to be a really big record player. And did you know that the interior of the statue was designed by another Frenchman by the name of Eiffel? That's right, the same Eiffel who, a few years later, would design the Eiffel Tower. So you can see the Eiffel Tower here, and then they kind of drew a little rendering of the Statue of Liberty and how the inside of her body is very similar in structure to the Eiffel Tower. And did you know that while the statue was first being constructed in Paris, a bunch of Parisians, mostly writers, they like to eat, actually dined in the area just below the statue's knee? This is true. While the statue was rising, Bartholdi set up a lunch 4 stories up to impress and enthrall these French writers, who, being difficult to impress and enthrall, were at least mildly amused. Okay, I'm going to stop there for just a minute. We're going to return to the book after a second, but first I want to pause and talk about primary sources. So the last couple weeks I've had objects with me to show you as primary sources. But today, since we're talking about the 1880s, I didn't have anything around my house from the 1880s. So I had to get creative and look online and try to find some primary sources. So today the things I'm going to be showing you are primary source documents that were published in magazines and newspapers. So these are going to be like drawings or sketches, not a photograph. So the first one, I want you to think about, what do the following images teach us about how the Statue of Liberty was constructed? So what can you learn from the primary source images? Now, if we were in the classroom, I would have printed these out nice and big and hung them around the room and let you go around and look at them with magnifying glasses and really study them up close. And you could do that later. I could post these on the Facebook group, and you can look at them closely, maybe zoom in and look at them more carefully. But today I'm just going to show you briefly what they look like. So here are some workmen constructing the Statue of Liberty. So it might be kind of hard for you to see, but there's some men here, and they're working on bits and pieces of the statue. And there's scraps laying around, and there's a huge arm and a hand holding the tablet here that they're putting together. And they're inside an old warehouse-looking building where they must have started constructing it. So I thought that was really interesting to see them putting all those pieces. Remember, there was 214 crates of pieces they had to put together like a puzzle. Then here they are assembling the Statue of Liberty, and they've got like some scaffolding around, and all they have done is like the waist down of her, and over here is the torch and her head, and then there's people way down here to kind of show you how tiny they are compared to her. And you can see them up here working as well. There's a person right there. And then here they are. They've got her mostly put together, and they've got some scaffolding up here where they're putting together her head and the torch. And you can see just little bitty dots here that are the people working on her, trying to keep it all together. And you can see the boats around in the harbor surrounding her. So pretty interesting to see them constructing all of that on Bedloe's Island. And then here's another one where they've got her mostly put together, I think this one looks like it was set when they were maybe putting her together in Paris because the buildings around her, she doesn't look to be on an island. But it kind of shows you this is a rendering of Bartholdi. That's what he looked like. And here's someone compared to her back foot. And so it just kind of shows you the progress that they went through to put her together. It's a lot of pieces. And then that's what she looks like today if you were to go visit her in New York. And I was going to show you real quick. There's what she would have looked like if she were still copper. Okay, what she looked like for about 30 years before it oxidized and turned that greenish blue color. So if she were still copper today, if they were to go and clean her and shine her up, that's what she would look like. Wouldn't that look a lot different? All right, so I'm going to go back to reading to you the rest of our book. We're almost done, but I wanted to show you those primary source images first. Okay, but there is one thing you might not know, and this is the central point to this book. A point the author apologizes for taking so long to get to. The point is that even if you have seen a picture of the Statue of Liberty, or many pictures of the Statue of Liberty, or even hundreds of pictures of the Statue of Liberty, you probably have not seen pictures of her feet. And even if you have seen pictures of her feet, you probably have not seen pictures of the back of her feet, in particular, her right foot. Okay, even if we look at the image up here, you can't see the back of her feet. You just see the front of her. What do you notice when you see this picture? So here's her foot, and they're kind of standing looking at it. What do you notice about it? See something different? And here's a zoomed in image of her foot. Notice that it's sticking up a little bit. What might that imply? That's right. She is going somewhere. She is on the move. I even have an image up here I can put up so it's a little bigger for you. There's her right foot. See how it's sticking up like she is moving or going somewhere. Let's pause here and collect ourselves and think about this. Let's discuss this. Let's think about and discuss the fact that this is the largest sculpture in all the land and the most iconic symbol of the United States of America. Let's talk about the fact that this statue has welcomed millions of visitors and immigrants to the USA. People talk about her unusual headwear. They talk about her gown, which seems a very heavy kind of garment and would likely result in serious lower back issues. They talk about her beautiful torch and the severe look on her face. But no one talks about the fact that she is walking. This 150-foot woman is on the go. Every time we see the Statue of Liberty in pictures, or anytime we imagine the Statue of Liberty, we see her standing still, very still, like, well, a statue. And here's a lot of the type of things that you could buy if you visit New York City. I had one of these as a kid. You could buy the glasses and all the little statues and mugs and the snow globe and all those kind of things. But they just show her standing still. But she is moving. She weighs 450,000 pounds. Do you know what size shoe she would wear? Size 879 shoe. And she is moving. How can we all have missed this? Or even if we saw this and noticed this, how is it that we have seen and noticed a 450,000-pound human on her way somewhere and said, just another 150-foot woman walking off a 150-foot pedestal? And most important, where is she going? Is she going to Soho to get a panini? Is she going to the West Village to look for vintage Nico records? No. She's facing southwest, so she's facing New Jersey. Could she be going to Trenton? No, wait. She's facing southeast, so she is not going to New Jersey, but she is going somewhere. But where? Why is she moving? There are certain things we know. We know that around her feet are chains. They are broken chains, implying that she has freed herself from bondage. We know that Bartholdi wanted us to know this. He wanted us to see the chains. People have talked about the chains. But few talk about the foot that is so obviously in mid-stride, about the fact that her entire right leg is in mid-stride. What does this mean? What does this mean that we often forget about this right foot, this right leg? Here's an idea. Here is a theory. Here is a reminder. If the Statue of Liberty is a symbol of freedom, if the Statue of Liberty has welcomed millions of immigrants to the United States, then how can she stand still? Liberty and freedom from oppression are not things you get or grant by standing around like some kind of statue. No, these are things that require action, courage, and unwillingness to rest. The Statue of Liberty was not built to welcome just 1,886 immigrants from Italy on one certain Sunday in, say, 1886. No, she was built to welcome 3,000 immigrants from Poland the next day. The next day, 5,000 Norwegians. After that, 10,000 Glaswegians. Then Cambodians, then Estonians, Somalis, Nepalis, Syrians, Liberians. It never ends. It cannot end. After all, the Statue of Liberty is an immigrant too. What does that mean? Didn't she come from another country too? And that is why she's moving. That is why she is striding. In welcoming the poor, the tired, the struggling to breathe free. She is not content to wait. She must meet them in the sea. And there she is. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about some science you could do with this. Before I get to that, I want you to really be thinking about where could she be going. You could make up a story about that, or maybe you really think about how she got where she is and what she symbolizes. And I would love for you to share that with me on our little Facebook group. And you could tell me, what do you think she symbolizes, or why was she created? And you can post that on our Facebook group. All right, so we're going to do a quick science experiment. This is one that you can do at home with just some basic supplies. All you need are some pennies, some kind of small plate or dish, some paper towels, and some vinegar, the stinky stuff. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to turn a penny to look like the Statue of Liberty. So I'm going to tell you that pennies dated 1982 or before are 95% copper. So they are going to give you a better result. If they're newer pennies, they are only like a little thin copper coating, so they don't oxidize quite as well. They don't turn out as neat. So what you're going to do is you're going to get a paper towel and just fold it over and place it on your plate or dish. And you're going to get some vinegar. And you're going to get some pennies. Okay, it doesn't matter how many. Search around your house and find some pennies. Like I said, before 1982 is best. And just lay them out on the plate like that. And then you're just going to get some vinegar. And you're going to pour it on your napkin to kind of soak it. And then you're just going to let those pennies sit. Now, in an hour or so, you might see a little bit of change, something like this. But if you let them stay for, say, a day or two, and you have to flip them over every once in a while, and you might have to re-wet your paper towel with some more vinegar every once in a while too. But if you do that, I set these up on Tuesday, and I'm going to show you a few of my pennies from Tuesday that we did. Do you notice what color they are? They have turned that bluish green, just like the Statue of Liberty. And I have a bunch that turned bluish green. They even turned my paper towel a bluish green just from being in the vinegar. So I thought that was really fascinating, kind of the before and after of those pennies, how much they changed just in a couple days. So that's the same way. That's a chemical reaction that's happening with the pennies, just like what happened to the Statue of Liberty. So I hope that you try that. I would love to see some pictures or videos of the before and after of your pennies. It's a great experiment to do at home, just with some basic supplies you probably have around the house. Okay, a couple more things. Our Facebook group is Mrs. Owen's RSU Showcase. That's where I'd love to hear your input on what you think the Statue of Liberty is doing, where she's going, what she symbolizes for our country. And I would love to see your penny experiments too. I have one more thing before I leave you today. If you want to, I would love to pack all of you up and take you to New York so we could tour the Statue of Liberty. You actually can go in her these days, not right now because of the pandemic, but normally you can go inside the Statue of Liberty and you can, I looked it up just now, there's a museum in the pedestal, and then to climb to the top of her crown is 377 steps. That's 20 stories high that you have to climb to get to the top, and you can look out. Since I can't take you all there, the first thing you
with Mrs. Duff today. I wanted to welcome some of my special students that sent me a message over the weekend, maybe yesterday, maybe this morning. Mrs. Johnson, our fourth grade teacher here at Sequoyah, has two girls, Reagan and Dakota, and they've been watching every day and are very excited to hear stories and learn some new things. I also heard from some students from Claremore School. Angela Byington's grandchildren have been watching, so hi guys. Nice to see you this morning. And then we've got Cassie who's been watching, and some of my students from my classroom. I know McKenna and Marilyn and Jackson, and I know there's a lot of you out there watching. So I really appreciate the wonderful feedback and the wonderful messages you've sent to me over the last few days. We're going to start this morning just like we start our morning in kindergarten, but probably you start your morning that way in pre-K and first grade. Some of you in second grade might even start your morning that way with our calendar. And it is the month of April. Can you say April, boys and girls? Very good. Now, last week we did a month Macarena where we said all the months of the year. Today, we're going to also do that. I'm going to do it standing up so you can see the motions. But when it's turnaround time, I have this little microphone hanging on me, so I can't do that part. But I want you to do that part. So let's do that together before we do our calendar. Let's say all our months of the year. Are we ready? Are you sure? Are you standing up? Mom and Dad, while we're in the middle of doing this, or Grandma and Grandpa, or whoever's house you're at today, go ahead and go get a journal and some writing materials while we do this, if you can, if you guys don't have those things ready. Ready, set, you bet. January, February, March, and April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, December. Then you turn around again. January, February, March, and April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, December. Then you turn around slow motion. January, February, March, and April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, December. Then you turn around. One more time. Fast forward this time. Ready, set. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Then you turn around. Sit down. Good job, boys and girls. Give yourselves a pat on the back. We forgot to give each other a hug today. Reach wide out. Give yourself a big ol' hug and say, I love my friends. I miss my friends. I miss my teacher, and this is a hug for all of them. Oh, very good. Good job, boys and girls. Now, let's look at our calendar. We have days of the week that we've been working on in kindergarten, and I know in first grade and second grade you also work on those, and in pre-K. And I have my days of the week all mixed up here. Some of you might not even know what day of the week it is right now. What does this one say? Wednesday. Good. Thursday. Oh, we're upside down. Monday. Good. Tuesday. Friday. Saturday. And Sunday. You guys are amazing. Were those in order? They weren't, were they? I did that on purpose because we are reading these now in kindergarten and first grade and probably in second grade. We're reading those. But today I kept out is actually Thursday. So today is Thursday. So we're going to pop that right in there. So I've got our April calendar ready. And we 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Are you counting with me? 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and today is 23. Can you boys repeat after me, please? Today is Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. Now, down here at the bottom, I have this little tag, and it says Hatching Day. Well, the month of April goes to the 30th. But down here where it says hatching day, that's the day that our chicks are meant to hatch. And that's actually the first day of May. So I can't put it on the April calendar, but I put it at the end. Now, we also have a pattern going on our calendar. Do you notice our pattern? Let's do it together. A, B, B. A, B, B. A, B, B. We're not going to do the whole calendar, but that's a way that you could do patterns. Parents, if you want to at home, get some cereal or maybe some macaroni that are different colors or different shapes, and you guys can make patterns at home also to work on those patterning skills and those math skills. Now, we talked about hatching day. I have been watching those eggs at my house. Who's been on Facebook at Storytime with Mrs. Duff? Some of you have. Raise your hand if you have. Good job. Now, boys and girls, I actually candled an egg, and we're going to try it. I don't know if it will work. Mr. Trujillo, tell me if I'm too close or too far away, or if you can see that. Can you see that at all? Okay. Oh, where, like right there? Okay. Is it working? Okay, if you notice, it's kind of hard to see. That's when I candled the egg at my house, and the little chick is moving around inside the egg. Kind of a short little video. Okay, so that was me candling that egg, and that actually, the video is actually on Storytime with Mrs. Duff on Facebook. So you just type in Storytime with Mrs. Duff, and it'll come up. I can't find it half the time myself, but I thought that maybe you guys would enjoy that, boys and girls. Also, before I go over there and sit down to tell my story and to do some words with you, I wanted to talk to you about what our chick might look like in its shell. This is the egg book. I'm not reading the whole book, but after only 2 days, the chick is beginning to form, and this is kind of what it looked like. I actually candled it at about a week, maybe a little further, so that was a little bit bigger in there. Before it hatches, it'll fill up the space in the egg and absorb all the yolk in there. So this is one that's ready to hatch at 21 days. So after 21 days, we'll see those start hatching, and there's not a whole lot of exciting things going on in there. They're just quiet and their eggs growing. Now, if you remember last week, my grubby little poster here, but we can see it also. We're on day 14. So if you're marking off on your calendar, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more days. So maybe next Thursday when I come, I might be able to take some pictures. They might start hatching by then. So maybe not. It might be that next week that we get to see those hatched chicks, boys and girls. I'm going to move all this over here so it's not in our way. Oh, and also last week I showed you this. I'll try to get this one open and show it to you again. It's pretty much the same thing. It just shows about how big our chick is inside its shell now. So just some exciting things about our egg hatching. You know, there's other little animals that start to grow and hatch and develop this time of year. Those boys and girls are tadpoles and sometimes moths and butterflies. And I know that Mrs. Truehill has some butterfly caterpillars that are eating and developing at her house also. So Brantley and Chase are probably watching those, and probably her other little grandchildren are also as well. Now, we talked about our eggs and our candling. Last week we put beans in a bag, but guess what? Womp womp. Mine kind of molded. Sometimes that happens. They just don't always grow. I know that Brantley Green and his sister and brother also planted beans. Their mom sent me a wonderful picture of their beans that had sprouted and were way out. So maybe mine just had a little too much moisture. It was just too cold in this classroom. It's kind of cold in here because we're not here all the time to warm it up. So now, boys and girls, I think we're going to move over to a story time chair and talk about some words. Now, before we have our story, I want to talk to you about some words that I want you to give you some hints of what our story is going to be about. It's a really short story today, but our hints are, I'm going to start telling them, and you think about what the story is going to be about. While we do this, though, we're going to figure out how many syllables are in each word. Ready? Hail. Let's do it. Hail. Let's see. Another one. Rain. Rain. How many syllables did rain have in it? Just one. Very good. Okay. The next word is raindrops. Raindrops. How many syllables are in raindrops? 2. Good job, boys and girls, because we know if we count it 2 times, it's 2 syllables. Very good. Umbrella. Ready? Umbrella. Ooh, that had 3. Good job. Thunderstorm. How many? 3. Good job. Lightning. Are you kind of coming up with an idea of what this story is going to be about? That's right. It's going to be about weather. Very good. Rainstorm. 2. Very good. And cloud. Just 1. Good job. Snowstorm. 2. Good. Showers. 2 also. Very good. Give yourselves a pat on the back for doing those syllables and those words. Now, we've got compound words that we're talking about too. Raindrop. So we've got raindrop. If I take drop away, I've still got rain, and I'm going to add bow. So now what do I have? Rainbow. Take bow away and add shower. What do you have? Rain, shower. Good job, boys and girls. We could also do some other compound words like firemen and take man away and put fly. Now we have firefly. Take fly away and put truck. Fire truck. Take truck away and put pit. Fire pit. Boy, we've been filling that up with a lot of branches that have broken off in our wind. Lots of wind at my house lately. So I'm going to tell you a story today, and it's about just some weather. And we have 3 kinds of clouds. We have stratus, cumulus, and nimbus. And when you look up in the sky and you see those clouds, that's how meteorologists know that we're going to have some weather, maybe some bad weather, maybe just a cloudy day, but usually a little bit of rain comes with those. Now, if you want to, I'm going to tell you a story. You guys, what do you think the story should be about? We're talking about weather. Yeah. A thunderstorm. Well, this is the time of year where we do have thunderstorms. What a good idea. Should it be about a boy or a girl? A boy. Okay, it's going to be about a boy today. I know. We have a lot of girls watching. It's going to be about a boy today. So this is a boy named Justin. This boy, Justin, loves to go outside and play and ride his bike and climb in trees. And he lived way out in the country on a big lot with tons of trees. So he was outside all day long playing. Didn't stay in, wasn't playing those games inside. He was outside playing around in his backyard or even in his front yard. So one day, Justin was out riding his bike, and all of a sudden, it got really dark. All these clouds started coming over Justin's yard. And Justin wasn't sure. It kind of felt a little different, too. Kind of felt a little sticky. His head kind of got a little stuffy, and he thought, this is a little bit odd. I'm not used to playing outside when it's getting dark during the day. It doesn't usually get dark during the day. So he put his bike away where it was supposed to. He didn't leave it in the middle of the yard for his dad to run over with the lawnmower. He went and he put it in the garage, and he went inside. When he got inside, about the time he got inside, a big gust of wind came. We talked about wind last week. Wind is a big weather thing, and a gust of wind came, and all of a sudden, it got really dark outside. So Justin's mom said, hey, why don't I make you some hot cocoa to warm up, because it got kind of cold out there, and you can sit and watch your favorite television show. So he sat down, and he was ready to watch his favorite television show about rockets and Martians. Well, just about that time, Rockets and Martians had just come on, and Justin heard a big clap of thunder. And guess what happened? All the lights went out. And Justin's mom said, oh, we must be getting a big storm. And her phone had an alert that went off. And it said, there is a thunderstorm in your area. And there's lightning. Don't go outside. Take some shelter. So they stayed in the house, and they were happy about it. But Justin's mom heard that wind. And she, even though there was no tornadoes, she was a little concerned. So she said, I think right now is a good time to practice our tornado drill in our house, just in case we got some worse weather than just a thunderstorm. So they had talked about before where they would go if there was some bad weather. Well, their neighbors lived in a mobile home, so their neighbors usually had to go down inside of a little cellar. But Justin's family lived in a house that was made of bricks, so they stayed in their house. And it had a foundation so they could go, and they had just a place where they went in their house, which was kind of a closet that was under the stairs. And they went in the closet, and they had to have a flashlight because when they went to turn on the lights in the closet, guess what? There was no light in the closet because the lights had gone out. Justin was starting to get a little nervous when they heard that the wind had died down and the storm had kind of passed. Well, Justin's mom said, it's time. We can go ahead and come out from under the stairs. We've done our tornado drill, and we know there's not a tornado coming today. And they went, and they sat in the living room, and they were watching out the window. And all of a sudden, they heard this loud, almost kind of a roaring sound, but it was really loud. Things sounded like they were hitting the top of the roof. And it looked like it was kind of snowing. And it wasn't snow. It was hail. Hail happens when up in those clouds, it gets really cold and that water freezes and it drops down in little circles like little balls. Sometimes they're as big as golf balls. Sometimes they're just teeny tiny like pennies and dimes. And that's how the weatherman will say it's dime-sized hail or it's golf ball-sized hail. If you hear him say it's softball-sized hail, somebody's windshield got broken. So they didn't want that size of hail. So anyway, Justin and his mom they decided to do some fun things because the TV was out. So his mom said, why don't you get out your crayons and your journal with your paper in it, and we're going to draw a picture about the thunderstorm and all the things that are happening in the thunderstorm. And so Justin started drawing, and he'd been drawing for about 5 or 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, he realized that the lights came back on, and it got really bright in the living room. The TV didn't come on because it was off. And he kept drawing, and his mom came and said, Justin, you have a beautiful picture. You've drawn some clouds, and you've drawn some rain. You even drew a picture of us where we practiced our tornado drill. And then guess what she said? I want you to go outside, and I want you to look in the sky. So Justin went out. So he was nervous. I mean, would you be nervous? He said, Mom, I don't want to go outside. It is thunderstorm and raining, and what if I get hit by lightning because I saw lightning? Justin's mom said, it's okay. It wasn't a very long storm, and it's past now. And so they went outside. And when they got outside, they could hear the birds beep, 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 chirping in the trees. They could see lots of limbs that had gotten blown out of trees, and there were some things that had been blown around in the yard. Justin was so glad he had put his bicycle away because he didn't want his bicycle to get rained on. But his mom says, Justin, I want you to look up in the sky. And there in the sky was the gift that sometimes we get after a rainstorm. It was the most beautiful rainbow coming down from the clouds. The first thing Justin said was, can I chase it and see if there's a pot of gold at the end of it? And his mom said, no. But let's draw it in your journal. So they drew the nicest rainbow, and at the end of the day, Justin tore out his picture in his journal, and they put it on the refrigerator for everyone to enjoy all throughout the year. And his mom kept it up there to remind him that sometimes you have thunderstorms in life, but at the end of it, a big rainbow comes out. That's the end of the story, boys and girls. Today, I don't have any words up here. Have you noticed that? I didn't put any words up there. We used our words other ways. But today, let's get out our journal very quickly. I hope your moms and dads went and grabbed it. You should have your journal ready. Your journal, I want you to, we're going to write a sentence. You can write the sentence I write, or you can write your own sentence. And the sentence I'm going to write, because I really enjoyed the very end of the story. What happened at the end of the story, boys and girls? That's right, a rainbow came out. So there was all that bad stuff that happened. But then a rainbow came out. So you could draw a rainbow in your journal. Or you could draw the wind. Wind is kind of cool, isn't it? I don't think I'm getting my rainbow in order, so I don't need anybody to comment on how my rainbow's not in order. It's okay. You can do your rainbow however you want, because it's your rainbow, right? And it's my rainbow. So let's write some words about our rainbow. How about the word the? Very good. And I'm going to use that compound word, rainbow. The rainbow. What should I say about the rainbow? Is colorful. That's a good one. How about the rainbow is big? That's another good one. Oh, I like that one. The rainbow is pretty. Let's do that. I'm going to move my water there. That's not water to drink. So the rainbow is pretty, because I think rainbows are pretty and they're beautiful and they make us happy, don't they? And I'm not doing a very good job reaching down there. Okay. I'm kind of being lazy. I wanted you to be able to see it all. So let's read it together. The rainbow is pretty. Do you just have to write about a rainbow? No, you can write about the storm. You can write about taking shelter. You can use some of the other words we talked about. Hail, lightning, wind, all of those things. All of those are correct things to write about when you're writing about the story that Ms. Steph just told. Now, boys and girls, before we go, I want to show you something. I actually have two things. I hope I have time, Mr. Trujillo. You're just going to have to give me time. Okay. Now, if I put a cotton ball in here, watch how the water drips from it. That's kind of how water drips from a cloud. If the cotton ball isn't very, see, right now it's not very heavy, so it's not dripping. But if you get a little more water, it has to let it go. And it's kind of how a cloud is. Now, I have an activity with this water, not just the cotton ball. That's kind of a cool one. But kids like cotton balls. Oh, by the way, you could make pictures with cotton balls that would look like clouds. That was part of my thing, but I don't think I'm going to get to that part today. We might have to do that next week. This is just plain old shaving cream. It's got to be the white kind, though. Okay? And then when you drip just some color, food coloring down inside your shaving cream, it's supposed to drip. I don't know if shaving cream a little too thick. But if you do this on top and then you drip that food coloring down in there, it will start to go through the shaving cream and drip down, kind of like stuff goes through a cloud. And the rain starts coming down. That's how the rain works. And if it were really cold, it might fall down and hail. Probably not in my cup, but it's a pretty cool activity I found yesterday. And finally, I wanted to talk to you. The last thing I wanted to tell you about was a story that I kind of got my idea from. If you want to go outside with your journal and you want to look at clouds, there's a story called It Looked Like Spilt Milk. It's written by Charles Shaw. So parents, if you could find that on the internet, you might have it at home. It's kind of a popular book. Basically, when you look up at the clouds, you find different shapes in the clouds. So when it's one of those beautiful days. Today is kind of an overcast day, kind of maybe a little rainy, but maybe Saturday when it gets really pretty, you could go outside with a blanket, like a quilt, like Miss Steph has, lay down on the ground, lay down and watch as those clouds go by. And you could journal about that, or you could use some cotton balls and make a picture of your own that looks like a cloud. So, Mr. Trujillo, do I have more time? I have another minute? Awesome. Good. Good deal. I also have a story I wanted to show you about how a seed grows. And on Tuesday, I knew that it was going to rain, so I went and got my neighbor's tiller, and I tilled my garden, and I put a whole bunch of seeds down, lots of different seeds like this. Kind of like the beans we put in the window that were a flop, that didn't do anything. But hopefully mine that are in the ground today got watered, and they're growing now because of all the rain yesterday. And then as the seeds germinate, they planted theirs in some egg cups. And as they germinate, they start to grow. And I'm hoping that's kind of what mine are doing under the soil right now, because that's kind of exciting. I hope to get some wonderful vegetables out of there. Boys and girls, I want to tell you to have a wonderful week. I miss you. All of your teachers do. I've talked to a lot of your teachers, Miss Partizana and Miss Gideon and Mrs. Saul. And if you're from another school, remember to get on Story Time with Mrs. Duff and give me a shout out on Facebook. Some of you, I think you have to be invited. So ask me to invite you, and I will invite you. You can put your pictures from your journal today, maybe your rainbows or your other rain pictures, your other weather pictures that you made. Try to stay safe. If you see a rainstorm coming, take cover. I'm done. All right. Thanks. Have a good day.
And good morning to everybody. Glad you could join us today. Thanks to RSU TV. I'm going to do a couple of introductions. First of all, I'm Larry Wilson, and I am the only social studies teacher in 6th grade at Sequoyah Middle School. I want to give a shout out to my 6th grade class. You guys have been missing. Everybody. No, you guys are home just like me, hunkered down. But I'm glad you're here. Glad you could join us on television today. I want to talk today about history, but I hope that word history doesn't immediately send you to sleep. I think we can learn many things from history, and I think we're going to learn something about ourselves today. Something I think that we need to hear today. I want to use the word resilient. Now, the word resilient is an interesting word, but if you take a squishy ball and you scrunch it up and you make it as small as you can, what happens when you let it go? It pops back out. You squish it down and it pops back out. That is resilience. And I'm not talking about resilience of squishy balls. I'm talking about resilience of people, human beings like you and like me. Oklahoma is resilient. And that's what history teaches us. Like, really, I think no other state have a fascinating history. We're resilient. And as we look through history, we're going to see we've weathered many storms. I was talking just before we began production here. When you get old like me, you've got a lot of history. And you look back on it, and you can draw from a lot of things. When we're young, we don't have as much history to think back on. I know many in my class and many of the students I've taught over the years think I'm still in my 30s. At least that's what they tell me. They get extra points, of course. No, they don't. I remember when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. That's how old I am. I was in grade school, and it was a traumatic event on all of America. All the children, we didn't play out in the streets anymore. All of us went in. We watched the television. I remember my mom saying that we don't laugh. We don't laugh today. It's a very serious day. And so I can go back and draw upon those things and remember history. And it's taught me some things, and it teaches us some things as we look back. We need to remember, and you'll learn this more and more, but we stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before us. Now, I'm not talking about literally standing on somebody's shoulders, but I'm saying the generation that went before us, the generations that went before us, we stand on their shoulders. We owe them a debt for what they've done, what they've been through. And we can take courage and strength from studying their lives. So history's alive. It's not just memorizing dates and places, but it's also learning what has this given to me? How has this made me? How has this shaped me into who I am? So we're going to do a little bit of that this morning. I'm going to give a historical list of some of the storms that we've faced in Oklahoma. And I'll challenge you. I can only briefly mention these. I would love for you to find one of interest and go look it up. Do some study about it. Read about them. That will help you. It will help you to be strong, and it will help you to be fearless in any storm we face in life. In the current storm we're in, we need to remember it's not the first storm we faced. We're folks from Oklahoma. We've seen many storms. We're resilient. We don't shatter. We don't break. The Trail of Tears. I'm going to try to remember to do these. There we go. 1820, 1842. Andrew Jackson was president, and he developed a policy of Indian removal. In fact, it was called the Indian Removal Act, and you'll have to pardon me for drinking water now and then. Some 60,000 Native Americans were removed from their homes in the southeast part of Oklahoma, or the southeast part of the United States, moved them to what they called Indian Territory. Oklahoma didn't exist yet. The Cherokee, the Muskogee, the Seminole, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, other tribes later in different periods, each one had their own Trail of Tears. Pawnee, the Iowa, the Osage, many of the Wichita we hear. We talk about Apache, we talk about Comanche, just to name some of the various groups that had their own Trail of Tears. But in the removal of during the Andrew Jackson presidency, 4,000 people, and I've seen figures up to 8,000, perished on their way from southeast United States to Oklahoma. Disease they died of, starvation, exposure, and I think something else we failed to mention many times, they died of broken hearts. But when they arrived in Oklahoma, they didn't lie down and quit. They didn't give up. They built a new life. They started over. They created a new community. They created their people all over again. And we're part of that in Oklahoma. That's part of who we are. It's in our Oklahoma DNA. Trail of Tears shaped us in Oklahoma. The second historical thing I want to mention is you can't talk about that period of time without mentioning the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. We call it the war of brother against brother, but it is also the war of Native American against Native American. I have a flag here of the Cherokee Braves, the Cherokee Mounted Rifles. Now, for many reasons, and some of them I think are fairly obvious, the Native Americans in what was called then Indian Territory sided with the Confederacy. Some 8,000 Native Americans from Oklahoma, what is now Oklahoma, served as officers and enlisted men in the Confederate Army. The Cherokee Braves fought for the Confederacy. And there were many, many battles in Oklahoma. We just don't talk about them very often. I think it's a very neglected area of history study. I think it was the Battle of Falling Rocks, or it was the the waterfall incident. But there was a huge battle not fought very far from where I live. You just keep going past 169, get on 76th Street, drive, go across Highway 75 right there. There's one marker, nothing's changed. The battlefield's still there. And you had thousands of casualties. You had field hospitals set up. It was an immense area of conflict. The Confederate cavalry, Cherokee Braves, were there. And they fought against some other Native Americans. You had white and Native American forces together. You had the same who were fighting for the Union side. It was a terrible time, but it shaped who we are. And it shaped us as Oklahomans. The Civil War made us what we are today. After the Civil War, many freed slaves moved to Oklahoma area. They set up what were called the black cities, black towns that existed. Some of them are still there. They're very small, but they set up and they began again and started new lives and made Oklahoma stronger. If I want to mention the Civil War, let me mention some other conflicts. History, of course, is a study of human conflict. We can talk about the bigger wars that we fought. World War I, World War II, Korean War from 1950 to 1953. I put up a picture here. I could mention Vietnam was the war when I was growing up. We could talk about the war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq. This is Sergeant. He was Sergeant then, Van Barfoot. He later got promoted to second lieutenant, but he earned the Medal of Honor with the 45th Infantry Division. The 45th mainly drew their troops out of Oklahoma. It was the Oklahoma Division. They were sent to Italy. And there is not a single war that the United States has engaged in that has not brought people from Oklahoma. Every tribe, every Native American people have sent soldiers and warriors to war with the United States. And they're very proud, very, very proud veterans. And we hold them in high esteem. Many people from Oklahoma who are not Indian have gone to war and fought for this country. I mention him because he won the Medal of Honor. He was Choctaw. Won it in May 1944 in Italy as the 45th fought up that terrible, terrible spine of mountains that is Italy. Jack Montgomery was another Medal of Honor winner. He was Cherokee. Ernest Childers was Muskogee. There are 26 others from Oklahoma, Indian, non-Indian, but they've all won the Medal of Honor at different times in different wars. Many, many Oklahomans have given their lives to let us have the freedom that we do have. One thing I'll say, Oklahoma is a very patriotic state, and that's part of our resiliency. We've had trials and we've had storms, but one thing we do is we love our country. And every time I've ever been to a funeral for Native American, or if I've been to a gathering, there's always American flags there because they understand that connection to this great country. That's Oklahoma. Most states don't have that, but we do. It has helped to shape us. We don't forget the sacrifices of the 45th Division or the others who fought in all the various other wars. We don't forget our folks serving now in harm's way. They're the ones that help shape us and make us resilient. We're able to bounce back. Not only are we able to bounce back, we're able to come back better than before, stronger than before. Fourth thing I want to mention is the great flu pandemic of 1918. That shaped us as a state. I need to get us our new slide. That is a hospital scene. They would take buildings and convert them into hospitals. Some of them have tent cities. Some people were outside. Let me give you a few statistics on the great pandemic. It was called the Spanish flu. We don't really know where it came from. It was called the Spanish flu because during World War I, all the countries that were at war had limits on what you could talk about, and no one talked about their diseases in their country. Spain was a neutral country, and they started talking about, their press started talking about the terrible flu, so it became known as the Spanish flu. Some evidence, and I think pretty good evidence, shows it started in Kansas at a military base. And as the U.S. went to war, it went with them. And all the other nations that were there caught it, and everybody went home to their different places, and it became a worldwide pandemic. 20 to 50 million people worldwide died of the Spanish flu in 1918. 500 million were infected. You know, these numbers stagger us because they're more than I can imagine. 675,000 Americans died. More people died from the flu than died from World War I. I read an article last night of an Oklahoma City resident, and I will quote him. He said, "People died like flies. Schools were closed, churches were closed, business was closed, and that was all over the country, and it was right here in Oklahoma. Cities would they just had to close up. Only essential services, and things were very, very scary. There was really no cure. I did come across an interesting thought. I hope I don't get in trouble. Oh well. In Oklahoma, in the 1918 flu pandemic, there was not a run on toilet paper. However, there was a run on whiskey. And it became so scarce that it sold for $18.22 a quart. And $18.22 was a chunk of change back in that day, when you might work all day for a nickel. Prices went up, things got scarce, just like they do now. In Oklahoma, 7,500 people died from the flu. Another 100,000 were ill, and the state was much smaller in its population than it is now. Those were tough times. But I told you, we stand on the shoulders of people who went before us. We've been through tough times. We've been through times like this, and we've come back, and we will come back again. One of my goals here is I don't want us to be afraid. I don't want us to live in fear. To put it in Oklahoma terms, this isn't our first rodeo. We've been down these roads. Talk to your grandparents or your great-grandparents. Ask them about some of the things they've been through. It would be a good conversation to have. If you can get grandma or great-grandma off their cell phone, you could do that. So tell them to put it up. Talk to them. Visit with them. Learn about their experiences. Another thing that shaped us, and I can't begin to cover everything. And I know I'll leave some things. I'm not even going to begin to talk about our tornadoes. Tornadoes have shaped us. We're in Tornado Alley. And we could talk about how that has shaped us and how that has molded us and how entire cities, entire families have been totally destroyed. But I need to mention the Tulsa race massacre. It's called the Tulsa Massacre. It's called the Black Wall Street, destruction of Black Wall Street. May 31st to June 1st, 2 days in 1921. It is described by most historians. You can see a picture here of the destruction. "35 square blocks of homes and businesses were burned to the ground. It's called the single worst incident of racial violence in American history. And the investigation, you can go there to this Greenwood area now, which I did a tour. It's by myself and my son. All that's left of homes are the steps. You can see steps that go up from the street where there used to be a house, and you'll see the foundation stones. That's it. Block after block after block of homes. You can see where businesses used to be. It's just nothing left but the foundation stones. These still are hard things to deal with. They're hard things to grasp. But as a person who believes in a good study of history, we need to just keep searching. We need to come to the truth, but truth must prevail, and we must move forward. We need to do the right thing, but we must not ever fail to learn from these things, because if we fail to learn from them, I think it was George Santayana who said those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Many have said that, and it's true. A sixth thing I want to mention, the Great Depression. The Great Depression shaped Oklahoma, that and the Dust Bowl, I think, more than any other events. In the Great Depression, the 1929 stock market failure, to say about 1939, the start of World War II, is a worldwide depression. Massive unemployment, food lines, terrible poverty, hunger. Oklahoma got hit very, very hard. I read of people who had to live in chicken houses, chicken coops, and felt very good about it. This is a famous picture of tent city. That's not a temporary housing. That's permanent housing for them. The poverty was just devastating. But it wouldn't always be that way. It took a lot of hard work, and it took a lot of time, and it took a lot of patience. But America came through that, and Oklahoma came through that. Hard times, we call it. And they were hard times. But we're from Oklahoma. We're resilient. We've been through times like this, when businesses are closed down, when businesses fail. And I hope you're not touched by that. I hope someone in your family still has a job. But there are some families where no one does. And our heart goes out to them. But we need to remember we've been through that. We can come through that, and we will. Let me mention the Dust Bowl. I think the Dust Bowl, this is a picture out in Oklahoma Panhandle of a dust storm come rolling in. From 1930 to 1939, it just stopped raining. The wind picked up. The wind blows all the time here. We know that. Out in western Oklahoma, it blew up the topsoil, great mounds of it, and it made these humongous dust storms that lasted for mile after mile. It made everything dark. Even at noontime, you could not see more than 3 feet, sometimes less. Our topsoil was, they called it the dirty 30s. And they called it the dirty 30s because it was dirty. You couldn't keep your house clean. Dust, dirt seeped into every place. Our topsoil blew to New York City, Washington, D.C., all over. As the winds tended to blow that direction, it dropped Oklahoma topsoil there. Out of this era came what we call the Okies. John Steinbeck wrote about it in The Grapes of Wrath, which I hope you read. We were Okies, they called us. And some of us went to California. Some of us went to other places. The people of California and Washington and Oregon meant it as a cruel joke, a cruel word, but we took it and made something new out of it. We're good at that. But we were resilient. I need to talk about the decade I grew up in, for the most part. The 60s. That's when everything was groovy. Peace, love, flower power. It's tubular. It's cosmic. It's hip. There's a lot of words like that. I don't remember all of them. I was never any of those things. It's just what I heard. It's called the Decade of Upheaval, the 60s. And the United States changed. And Oklahoma changed. Everything. Vietnam War raged. Protests grew violent. Counter-protests. Assassinations. This was... I mentioned in the beginning the assassination of John Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963 at Dealey Plaza in Dallas. And most of us have seen that film of him riding in that open limousine. That shook America to the core. People wept in the streets. People wept in Oklahoma. His brother ran for president 5 years later, and he was assassinated June 8th, 1968 at the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. And we don't ever want to forget Martin Luther King Jr., assassinated April the 8th, 1968. These were terrible times. I pray to God that his dream come true someday. He had a dream. We need to have a dream. Oklahoma City bombing shaped us. This is from the memorial. This is the names of the children they put the little bears on. It's a moving place you need to go to. Every Oklahoman needs to go there. I need to mention the Twin Towers. 4 jets. 2 crashed into the Twin Towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and 1 crashed into the earth in a field at Shanksville, Pennsylvania, because the passengers rose up and said the terrorists aren't going to win this plane. And they didn't. Those were hard years. They're still hard. People still grieve these losses from Oklahoma City, from the September 11th attacks. And we need to remember that. We should grieve with them. We learn things from history. and we learn that we are resilient people. I need to mention one more thing. That is a depiction of the coronavirus. There's lots and lots of coronaviruses out there. In fact, as I understand it, the common cold is from a coronavirus. Right now, I looked at it this morning, there's about 2.7 million cases worldwide. Worldwide, 184,000 have died. It reminds us a lot of the epidemic of 1918 I mentioned. But we're not going to give in to fear. We're not going to cave into despair. History teaches us, we're from Oklahoma, and we don't do things like that. We don't do things like that. So I want you to go on with your life. Be cautious, be safe, be careful, be smart, but don't be afraid and don't live in fear. That's the lesson that we're going to learn from our history today. Thank you for letting me be with you. If you have any questions, specifically, drop me a line. I will try to answer those as best I can. You can do that at my web address on sequoiaheagles.net, and I'll give you a nice answer. Even if I don't know, remember, I don't know is an answer. So I promise I can answer any question you ask. I will give you one. So thank you very much for having me today, putting up with me, inviting me into your home with RSU. And we thank the folks at RSU for letting us do this.
Hey guys, Mrs. Dorsey here. I teach 7th grade math at Sequoyah Middle School, and I'm back with some more math. So the last couple of weeks we've spoken about like terms, coefficients, constants. Last week I taught you guys about one-step equations. We did addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and I had two-step equations in that lesson, but we ran out of time, so I'm just going to continue on with what I had scheduled for last week. So we have a two-step equation here, and this is generally how you will see those two-step equations set up. So let's sort of review what terms in this equation are. We have 2x, we have a positive 3, equals 9. That's not really a part of our terms. We're just looking at the expression. Our coefficient in this equation would be 2 because it's attached with the variable, which is x. Our constant is 3. So in a two-step equation, you kind of have to ask yourself the steps that you've learned before. First of all, you need to think about opposite operation. And what does that mean? So that means I'm going to do the opposite of whatever the equation is telling me to do. And think back to elementary school. A lot of kids get confused with what operation do I start with first? And if you think back to what we learned in elementary school, we always learned addition first, or at least I did, and my kids did. Then they went to subtraction, and then they went to multiplication and division. So in a two-step equation, that's how you start out. The first step is any addition or subtraction. And I'm not going to look at my 9. That's not what I do. I look at whatever the side the variable is on. So on that side, I have a positive 3 or a plus 3, and the opposite of that is subtraction. Very good. I'm going to rewrite the problem here so you can see it a little bit better. And I like to do my different steps in different colors so that you at home, but mainly my students in the classroom, can see the different steps. So I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. And don't forget, you've got to cross out the positive and negative 3 because that shows you know those go away because I've moved it to the other side. And so now we just do the math. 9 minus 3 is 6. Bring down your equal sign. Bring down what you didn't use. And in this case, that would be the 2x. Now I go to the second step, which is any multiplication or division. And of course, once you also get to this step, it should look familiar to you because it is a one-step equation. I have 2x, which means 2 times x, and the opposite of times is, once again, very good, division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Now, I write really big and what I think is kind of messy. So if you want to bring this down even farther, or if you are working on a sheet of notebook paper and you want to put lines in between each step, that's fine. So now we're just going to do the math. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So over here I'm going to have x equals 3. Now, what this means is I have solved for the variable. So if I plug in 3 back into the place of x, and I'll do that right above here in a different color. And remember, this is how we check our solution to see if we've done the math properly. So I'm going to plug 3 back into the equation where x would be, because remember, we solved for x. And if you remember from last week, we spoke about balancing equations. whatever is on the left side of the equation, I want to be on the right side of the equation. And I spoke about the scales of justice, because that's what I think about when I think of balancing equations. So 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 plus 3 is 9. I'll write it above here since I've got my funny little picture. And if you see, our equation is balanced. So that is how you can check your work to make sure that you have properly solved the equation. The what? Green? Okay. I'm being told green does not show up very well, so we are not going to use green. Okay, so here we have another equation. 4x plus 3 equals 19. I'm going to rewrite it. And I will just use black this time. So our first step, what do you think we're going to move first? If you said 3, you'd be correct. It's a positive 3, so we're going to turn it into a negative 3. Don't forget to cross that out to show that you know it goes away. And then we just do the math. 19 minus 3 is 16. Bring down your equal sign. Bring down what you haven't used. And we've now come to the second step, which is any multiplication or division. In this case, we're going to divide because we already have multiplication going on. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. And we will just do the math again. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. And I'll write it over here. I have students ask me, do I have to write the variable equals? And the answer is yes. That's what I tell my students. I need to know that you know what variable you've solved for. So I'm just going to circle my answer just because. So once again, if you guys have any questions, you can log in to, was it YouTube?
RSU TV.
YouTube at RSU TV, and you can go ahead and ask me questions live. How fun is that? Okay, here we have another two-step equation. We have 3x plus 2 equals 23. I'm going to go ahead and write it out. Was the red showing up good? Okay. So I'm going to work out this problem in red. Not because it's a negative color, but just because I like it. So 3x plus 2 equals 23. What do you think we're going to move first? You're right. We're going to move the positive 2. And if it's positive, we do the opposite. Of course, you could look at that as plus 2. And the opposite of that is a negative 2 or a minus 2. So don't forget, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So now we're going to just do the math. 23 minus 2, simple math here, is 21. Bring down your equal sign, bring down your 3x, and once again, we're just going to do the second step. And the second step of a two-step equation is any multiplication or division. And you're going to hear me be repeating those steps a lot because, like I said last week, repetition helps ingrain it into our brains, okay? So we're going to divide both sides by 3. And I'm going to write my answer over here. So we have x equals 21 divided by 3, which is 7. Now, I thought a bit about this last night, and there is a lot of, not controversy per se, but allowing calculators in the classroom. And this is my personal philosophy on that. Whenever I come to a new concept that requires mental math, I always like the kids to try a few problems without the assistance of a calculator. Once they've shown that they can master that, then I will throw that calculator in there. There are some lessons where we just go straight to the calculator because the concept isn't solely about multiplication or division. So remember, your calculator isn't your brain. It's an assistive tool for you to use to bridge that gap if you're stuck on something, okay? All right, ooh, math rocks. Why? Yes, it does. Okay, we have, oh my goodness, we have a different variable and it's in a different location. What do? We solve it like we normally would. Don't let a math problem that looks different mess with your brain. You still have only two steps, addition and subtraction or multiplication and division. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this problem, and we're just going to get after it. Okay, so we have 6 plus 5y equals 26. Now, you still ask yourselves, what's going to stay and what's going to go? That's something I ask in my class. I tell the kids, okay, what's going to stay, the variable, and what's going to move? Because sometimes you might think, oh, the 26 is going to move. But then I'm going to ask you, is that on the same side as the variable? It's not. So that's how you are able to tell what is going to go and what's going to stay. So in this case, we have a positive 6. Now, I don't want you to look at the plus sign in front of the 5y because that doesn't go with the 6. Remember, we always look at the sign or in front of the number. I don't see one here, so I automatically know it's positive. So I want that to be clear. So I'm going to subtract 6 on both sides. Remember, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So 26 minus 6 is 20. Bring down what you haven't used, which is our 5y, and we have another one-step equation. So 5 times y, the opposite of times is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 5. And I'll write my answer over here. We have y equals, what is 20 divided by 5? 4. Now, if the order of an equation confuses you, you can always rewrite it. There's nothing wrong with rewriting an equation so that it suits your learning style. The important thing you remember is this, that you keep the signs with the correct numbers. So, let me rewrite this in red, and I'm going to rewrite it down here. If I wanted to have that in what we call standard form, I would move the positive 5y to the front, and then I would make sure that I moved that positive 6 behind it. And then, of course, the equals 26, that doesn't change at all. But notice, it's a positive 5y here, it's a positive 5y here. It's a positive 6 up here. It's a positive 6 down here. Remember, you can rearrange the equation to write it to where it looks like you would normally solve it. Just make sure you keep your signs the same, because if you don't, then that's going to mess up your answer. Okay. Oh, we have a fraction here, and we have a 0. Our variables on the right side of the equation. So I'm going to solve this 2 different ways. I'm going to solve it without rewriting it, and then I'm going to solve it with rewriting it so you can see the difference. So I'm going to rewrite it over here. 0 equals 6 plus 1/3 t. So you still ask yourself, what stays and what goes? The variable stays. And so the 6 and the 1/3 are on the same side as the variable. So that's how you know what moves. It's on the right side of the equal sign does not mean that you solve it any differently. Don't let the way an equation looks fool your brain into thinking all of a sudden you don't know how to do it. So I'm going to move the 6 to the other side. It's a positive 6, not because of the plus sign, but because there's no negative sign in front of the 6. I keep stepping on something, sorry. I'm barefoot. It's not going to be a surprise to any of my kids at home because I usually kick my shoes off when I teach. I'm just more comfortable that way. So anyway, little secret of television, I guess. So we're going to subtract 6 on both sides. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So 0 minus 6 is -6. Bring down what you haven't used, which is that 1/3 t. Now, I always tell my kids, whenever you see a fraction attached to a variable, you automatically multiply by the reciprocal. Now, that's kind of a big word, reciprocal. And what that means is we're just going to flip it. And we're going to flip it what, Eli? Hopefully you're watching at home. We're going to flip it real good. And that's sort of just a silly way to remember what to do with the word reciprocal. And here we go. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal. And so that cancels it out. Here's why it cancels it out. If I have 1/3 times 3/1, and I multiply straight across, I get 3/3. Now, 3/3 simplifies to 1. If I just have 1t, you normally don't see 1t written. So that 1 sort of just goes away, which is why these cancel each other out. And sometimes that step right here isn't explained in math. I don't necessarily go through that full explanation when we're first teaching it because sometimes that can be confusing. But I do come back to it at a later time so that the kids really understand, well, how does that go away? So now you know, if you didn't before. Okay, remember, what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3/1. Why did I put a 1 under the -6? Well, because that's how you turn a whole number into a fraction. Because I've got 3/1 as a fraction, and so I've got to make sure that both of my terms are fractions so I can multiply straight across. -6 times 3 is -18. 1 times 1 is 1, and of course that simplifies to -18. And if we rewrite it with a variable in front, t equals -18. Now I can hear some of you at home going, well, I don't have to have that 1 under the 6, and I don't have to have that 1 under the 3. And you would be correct, but when we're talking about middle school math, it's good to show every little step because we're not at that advanced stage yet, and it's important that your teachers know that you know exactly what you're doing. Remember, don't skip the simple stuff, because when you get into higher math, you're going to want to see every little detail, because you just might make one mistake, and instead of having to erase everything and start over, you can just fix that simple mistake. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Is it necessary to put parentheses around a negative number when it's near the equal sign? Repeat that question.
Okay, so Ms. Park wants to know, is it necessary to put parentheses around the equal sign, right here? So is it necessary to do this? And my answer is no, it's not necessary. And here's why it's not necessary, because the equal sign is not an operation. It just represents, it represents the word is. T is negative 18. Now, if we're talking about a negative inside of a problem, like next to a plus sign or a minus sign, then yeah, you do put parentheses around it, because that shows that this isn't acting as an operation. This is attached to a whole number. Does that answer your question, do you think? Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and erase this part down here. And I'm just going to rewrite the problem so you can see what that would look like. So the first thing you're going to do is you want your variable in front. So I'm going to take my positive 1/3 t and put it in front. Because remember, what we're doing right now is we're rewriting the equation so it looks like something familiar to you, because your brain's going to play tricks on you. We don't want it to do that. Now what we do is we write the constant. And the constant in this equation is 6. It's a positive. So we're going to put plus 6. And then, of course, it equals 0. So that is how you can rewrite the equation and make it look like something that's not so confusing. Do you have to do this? Absolutely not. Unless your teacher requires it, because remember, teachers will require different things of their students, and there's not a wrong way, just a different way. Okay. Yes. 3 minutes. Well, hello, Gage.
And Gabe.
Oh, Gabe. Oh, hi, Gabe.
Brody Brownlow.
Hey, Brody. Hope you're reading up on your math history. Oh, that's my mom. Hi, Mom. Hi. Okay. So, yeah, I'm known as Nikki in my family. I don't use it as my professional name. Okay, so we've come to a blank slide. And what I want to do is I want to rewrite that last problem. And I'm going to rewrite it this way. 1/3 t plus 6 equals 0. And this will be our last problem of the day together. You are usually not going to be taught what I'm about to teach you, because it is more steps. But what I have found is that some of my students actually like this way better. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here in a minute. We're still going to move our positive 6, and it's going to become a minus 6. Rewrite what we didn't use. Okay. Now, if you forget that 1/3 t means to multiply by the reciprocal, there's a different way you can do it. Stay with me. This also says 1 divided by 3. What is the opposite of division? Or, I'm sorry, yeah, the opposite of division, multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. And I get 1t equals negative 18. Now, 1t means 1 times t I'm going to divide both sides by 1. And I'm still left with t equals negative 18. The reason why this is a good way to show your students, or even to try this at home, is because you don't have to remember to multiply by a reciprocal. This is a little bit longer, but you still get the same answer. And that's what I love about math. There are so many different ways to solve problems. And don't be afraid to try something new, or to see, maybe I can solve it in a different way. And what I tell my kids, as long as you show your work and you get the correct answer, I don't care how you solve it. You might discover something new. So next week, we are going to dive into something new. We're going to talk about multi-step equations, and you're going to see some distributive property, putting like terms together, and I think it's going to be fun. So don't forget, practice these things at home. You can rewatch the video. You can ask me questions on my email account that's attached to my website at sequoiaheagles.net. If you're in my class, don't forget, you can reach out to me at Google Classroom. And I hope you guys have a great week. Be safe.
Oh, hi. I was just trying out some of Newton's laws of motion here. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is Newton's 3 laws of motion. The first law of motion says that things at rest remain at rest. Things in motion remain in motion until acted upon by an outside force. So this golf ball here is going to sit there, and it will sit there until some force causes it to move. Once it's moving, it will continue in that direction at that speed until acted upon by some other force. Now, I know you're sitting there going, Mr. Harshfield, when I start a ball rolling, it's going to roll, but it's going to stop. It's going to curve, as you see this golf ball curving. So what's going on here? Well, this counter is not perfectly straight, perfectly level. If it was, I could start the ball here, roll it across the table, and it would continue rolling until acted upon by something else. That something else would be gravity. Now, why does it slow down? Well, there's another force that causes it to slow down. That's the force of friction. Friction is what resists movement. And we call this ability to keep doing what it's doing inertia. Let's have a little demonstration here. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but that's part of science, right? So we got a plastic bottle here. I'm going to put a business card on top of it like so. And I've got a copper jacket bullet. I'm going to bounce it right there. Now then, what's going to happen if I flick the card? Well, the bullet has inertia. It's going to keep doing what it's doing until acted upon by another force. With the card there, involving Newton's 3rd law, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but that bullet is being held up by the card. If the card's no longer there, guess what happens? Gravity. Gravity pulls it. And this will happen every time. And we can even put more weight on there so we have more inertia. Another little something here. I've got a beaker, and I just put some paper towels in there to protect the glass from this. Set it there. Put this tube right there. And I'm going to put a golf ball right there. Make sure it's all lined up properly. Now then, you may have seen a magician do this. Magicians are simply using science. Got a broom here. I'm going to put the broom right here and step on the bristles so it makes kind of like a spring. And I'm going to adjust that just a little bit more. All right. So I'm stepping on the bristles. I pull back on the handle of the broom. I'm going to let it go. It's going to fly up, hit this cardboard. So you guys might see this cardboard flying at you. Don't worry, it won't get you. 1, 2, 3. Please note that the golf ball ended up in the beaker, just like I had planned it to be. So that's Newton's first law of motion. Things in motion continue being in motion. Things at rest will stay at rest until acted upon by an outside force. My cat at home is a perfect example of this. She could be asleep. She's going to stay asleep until acted upon by an outside force. My coming up and petting her. That's going to cause her to wake up and she's going to move. All right, this little car here has a spring inside, and when I back it up like this, it winds up that spring and causes it to move. But without that spring, that car's not going to move. It's not going to do anything. Newton's first law of motion. Newton's second law of motion says that force equals mass times acceleration. So the higher the mass, the faster the acceleration, the more force we're going to have to use to get it to do that. Also, we could adjust this so that we have acceleration equals force divided by mass. The faster we want something to go, the heavier it is, the more force we're going to have to apply to it. I have 3 different balls here. A golf ball, a handball, and a baseball. Which one of those 3 has the most mass? Not weight, mass. The difference between mass and weight is the effect of gravity. Mass is how much matter is contained in that object. Weight is the force of gravity pulling down on that object. So if I wanted to accelerate this golf ball a little bit of force, and we'll start it rolling. The more force I put, the faster it's going to roll. If I take the handball, now the handball has more mass, so I'm going to have to apply more force to get it to move. The more force, the faster it's going to move. The baseball has even more mass. Come back here. Stay. So the baseball is going to take more force to get it to start to move. I told you stay. The faster I want that baseball to move, the more force I have to put. So if you're looking at a pitcher and he's throwing a fastball, he's putting a lot of force behind it. If he's throwing a slow ball, he's putting less force. Now then, having said all of that, let me come around here. I have over here a 16-pound bowling ball. Can you imagine the inertia that this has? How much force am I going to have to apply to this bowling ball to get it to start to move? Well, it's going to take quite a bit compared to these others. And I'm going to try to get it to move, and I'm going to have to apply a lot of force to get it to move. A lot of force. Now then, we have this bowling ball, we have this golf ball. They are applying the same amount of force. Well, wait a minute. What's going on? That bowling ball is continuing to roll in the same direction. Newton's first law. That golf ball is recoiling and rolling in the same direction as the golf ball, or the bowling ball. What's going on? This has less mass. This has more mass. More force. This has less force. So when they collide, that force is transferred to the golf ball. Think of it this way. You want to go down the road in your car, and we'll say, just for sake of argument, you're in a little smart car. You want to get out on the highway, and you want to get up to 60 miles an hour. You push down the accelerator, the engine revs up, the car was going to move faster. Now, coming down the highway is a semi. That semi wants to get from a stop at the stoplight up to 60 miles an hour. It's going to take more force to move that semi and accelerate it to that same 60 miles an hour. So that's why if you get behind a semi and he's at a stop or he's speeding up, it may take him to get up to speed. So don't push him. That's also the reason that a semi needs more time to stop. Please, don't expect these semis to behave like a little sports car. It will not happen. All right, so we've talked about Newton's first law, which says what? Yeah, it says that an object in motion will remain in motion until acted upon by an outside force. It says that an object at rest will remain at rest until acted upon by an outside force. I like to think of it this way. Things will keep doing what they're doing until acted upon. This bowling ball is going to keep rolling in that same direction at that same speed until acted upon by an outside force, just like this golf ball will, just like the baseball, the handball, any other object. They can corral that thing so it doesn't roll away. All right, so that's Newton's first law. Things keep doing what they're doing until acted upon by an outside force. Newton's second law says that the more mass, the faster you want to accelerate something, the more force you're going to have to apply. What exactly is acceleration? I'm sure everybody's saying, well, wait a minute, you're throwing all these fancy terms out at us. What is acceleration? Acceleration is simply the change in velocity divided by the change in time. Delta V, or change in velocity, divided by change in time. That will give you the instantaneous acceleration. We can also look at Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration. We can adjust this equation so we can calculate the acceleration, we can find the mass, or we can find the force if we know the other two. So, having said all that, let me say this. Newton was a brilliant scientist. He's considered to be one of the best and most intelligent classical physicists in history. Not Einstein. Einstein was a modern quantitative physicist. Newton was a classical physicist. The difference is that Newton dealt with the natural world as he saw it. He dealt with light, he dealt with motion, he found the equation for universal gravity. And it's because of his equations, which have been verified, that we can send men into space, we can put satellites into space, we have been to the moon and back. Now, that brings up the third of Newton's three laws of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, which means when I push on this counter, I push down with a certain amount of force. It's pushing back with the same amount of force. When I push on this board, it's pushing back with the same amount of force. And that's great. That explains how a plane flies. That explains a baseball. Think about when you have a baseball coming at you and you're the batter and you hit the ball, action, reaction. The bat hitting the ball is the action. The ball flying off is the reaction. Now, wait a minute. You said without this third law, we would not have been able to put men in space. Well, how does a rocket work? What do you think? Any ideas? Well, we know that a rocket is going to expel gases, flames, force downward. But what does that mean for the rocket? How does that mean the rocket takes off? That is the reaction, the force being pushed down. The reaction is the rocket being pushed up. Now, here's the thing. As the rocket uses up its fuel, its mass is going to decrease, so the acceleration will increase, keeping the force the same. The force is the same when it takes off as it is when it reaches orbit, by this equation right here. Another thing that Newton did, and I know a lot of people that are upset about this, is he developed the idea of calculus. Oh yeah, calculus. But getting back to the rocket, we said that the rocket pushes out exhaust. The motion is going to push the rocket up, and we can show that by a simple balloon. This balloon has air, as you've seen me blow it up. If I release this, that air is going to be pushed out. That's the action. The balloon flying off in this direction is the reaction. Fun and games, science. So, that's Newton's 3 laws of motion. Things continue doing what they're doing until acted upon by a force. The amount of force is going to equal the mass times the acceleration that we want to achieve. And for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The school principal just walked in. I'm going to get him involved here. Mr. Osborne, as a principal, do you ever have any reactions to anything that you might do?
Yeah, most often.
That's the psychological action-reaction pair. Yeah. You missed this. Let's see if we can do this again. Would you hand me that cardboard right there, please, and the plastic tube? Thank you. Now, I shouldn't be doing this because this reveals the magician's secrets, and I'm sworn to secrecy on that. But I will tell you, magicians simply use science in their everyday thing. All right. So again, I've got a broom here, straw bristles. They tend to work the best. I'm going to set it right here. Pull this back. Now I'm stepping on the bristles, so it's going to act like a spring. There it is. Dropped it into the beaker, and it will work every single time because of inertia. Newton's first law. Things keep doing what they're doing until acted upon by an outside force.
What about friction?
Friction.
Explain something about friction. To slow down.
All right. What is friction? Friction is a force between objects. There's friction between this ball and the tabletop. That friction is where the surfaces meet, and it's going to resist movement. And so you've always heard, or at least I think you've heard, that you cannot create or destroy energy. There's some energy in moving this ball. That's part of the force. That friction is taking some of that energy and converting it into heat. Put your hands together and rub them real fast. And what do you experience? What does it feel like? It gets hot. That's the friction being rubbed in between your hands. So that's friction. It's the force that resists movement. That's the reason a ball will slow down. That's the reason a ball will turn and curve, because of friction acting on it in an unequal manner. What else? Do you have any questions? Anything else? I will tell you this, please, if you want to do this at home, have your parents get a broom for you. Don't use your mom's good broom. She tends to get a little testy about it because some of the bristles will be broken in this. And you may want to use a golf ball. If you do, put some paper towels in the glass that you're dropping it into so it doesn't break the glass. I've seen people do this with a raw egg. And what they will do is they'll put water in here, use that to collect the egg, protect the glass from the egg. So, Newton's 3 laws, once again, things at rest, or things will continue doing what they're doing until acted upon by a force. Force equals mass times acceleration. The more mass, the same amount of acceleration will create more force. And we have, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So, go out and try this, and remember that action-reaction is part of how a plane flies. You might want to try that. Go out and if you go out in the backyard and hit a baseball, remember the bat hitting the ball is the action, the ball flying away is the reaction.
Is there an example of an everyday occurrence that you could use the formula, like to figure the force of something? If you had like the mass of a car, or acceleration
Sure.
of the car, could you show the people at home maybe how, just an example of that?
Well, as an example, force equals mass times acceleration. All right, so we have the mass of a smart car. And just for the sake of arguments, I'm going to say 2,000 pounds. We want to accelerate it to, I don't know, maybe 35 miles an hour. So we're going to generate a force of about 6,000 newtons. Now then, if we have a semi, that semi is going to be somewhere around 40,000 pounds. And we want to accelerate that to 30 miles an hour. We're going to generate a force of that. Can you imagine how much force that would cause, how much damage that would cause if that semi ran into your little smart car?
That's the reason why present accidents are way worse than regular.
Yes, and my dad was a semi driver, so I learned a lot about this. And once again, don't expect a semi unloaded to be able to react the same way as a little sports car.
So is that the reason why trucks have a harder time stopping?
Yes. Remember.
Restate that question, just so they know.
All right. That is the reason trucks have a harder time stopping than a car. Remember, the more mass you have, the more force it's going to take. So in this case, we're trying to stop. The acceleration is going to be negative, so the force is going to be negative. But we've got this semi, we've got this little smart car. They run together. Guess what? That little smart car is going to be demolished. 1 minute. All right. So, just as a second or third or fifth review, Newton's 3 laws of motion. Things keep doing what they're doing until acted upon by an outside force. It's going to give me problems. All right. Number 2. The force needed to accelerate an object to a certain velocity is dependent upon the mass of that object, and the acceleration that we want to achieve. Third, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you push on something, that object is going to push back with the same amount of force. All right. So, thank you for being with me, and I hope to see you again next time.
Good morning, Rogers County. Welcome back to another episode of Science with Keeler. I am Stephanie Keeler. I teach science here at Sequoyah Mid-High High School. I teach 9th grade physical science and upperclassmen zoology. Today I thought I would do a physical science lesson. Ironically, it is also Newton's laws. I'm going to have to get together with Mr. Harshfield, make sure we don't duplicate. But the good thing is we have some different demonstrations, and it's just another way to look at it. I always tell students, when you are trying to learn a concept, talk to multiple people if you're having a hard time. I used to kick my kids next door to the science teacher. If they weren't getting what I was explaining about mitosis, maybe the next teacher might explain a little bit differently, and it clicks. So what I'm going to do is talk about Newton's laws. I'm going to have some people helping me out from around Rogers County, and we're going to look at some of the different things that go on. So with Newton's laws, you already know that it's Newton's laws of motion, okay? And so we're going to go through all three of the laws and talk about why this was such a fun thing to have a couple years ago. I still enjoy them. They were the bane of most teachers' existence. I think we took a lot of these, and that's probably how I got this one. But Newton's laws of motions. Newton's first law is going to talk about how things are moving or how things are not moving. So the first video I have for you today, Maddie gave me when we were still back in school. I actually did Newton's 3 laws with my students, and they had to develop videos that showed me they understood the concepts. And so this is Maddie's video from class, and I'm going to try and expand. Oh, can I go back? Yes, right there. Go back. All right. And we're going to play this video, and if you can expand it, Miss Bacon.
Go.
Okay, what happened? Maddie's little brother helped out, which was awesome, and he hopefully learned some things here as well. What did you notice? Let's try it again.
Go.
Okay, on go. What does he do? He pulls that piece of paper out, and his tower of cups remains where they are. Okay, we're going to put all that into talking about motion. What is in motion? The paper. What's not in motion? The cups. Okay, so what we have here is Newton's first law stated one way. There's two different ways to state it. The first one says objects do not change motion unless acted on by an unbalanced force. There's a lot of vocabulary in there. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the word objects. In my class, students are not allowed to use the word things or stuff. So the word objects is a good way to get around that. It's anything that has mass. Let's talk about mass. It has matter inside of it. So it could be air, it can be a solid, it can be a liquid. So an object doesn't want to change motion. So if you're already in motion, you want to continue in motion. Yes, sir?
How is mass measured?
Mass is going to be measured kind of like weight on the planet Earth. We're going to measure it in pounds or kilograms. So what I usually do is give my students a triple beam balance and ask them to find the mass of different objects. But it is a little bit different than weight because weight is a mass that is affected by gravity. So when I'm here on planet Earth, my mass is the same as on the moon. However, when I go to the moon, my weight will change because there's less gravitational pull. So it's a good place to hang out if I want to feel good about myself. All right, so the objects are not going to change motion unless they're acted on by an unbalanced force. Okay, unbalanced and force are the two other terms I want to talk about really quickly. When we talk about something being unbalanced, it's unequal. Okay, so whenever I think of unbalanced, I always think of a seesaw. If you have it unbalanced, it's going to have a high and a low. So when we're talking about an unbalanced force, that means there has to be more force or less force involved in the scenario, whatever it is. Force is literally just a push or a pull. That is the greatest definition. My kids love to write that one down because it's an easy one to remember, a push or a pull. So if I want to have an unbalanced force, I want to have more push or more pull, or less. Okay, I can decrease it, but either way, it's an unbalanced force. So if I have it in motion, it's just spinning. It's not going to change its motion unless I stop it because I created an unbalanced force for it. Okay, so here we have another word to describe Newton's first law. It's called inertia, and we're going to talk about inertia here in just a second, but here's some examples of the law. Another way to explain the law is to say An object in motion stays in motion. And so what I did was I asked some students from around Rogers County to help me demonstrate objects in motion stay in motion. So this is my friend Brantley, and Brantley's going to show you an object in motion stays in motion. I'm not sure you'll be able to hear the video, and I just want to explain to you quickly. He has a remote control car here, and what's kind of hard to see is that there's two eggs there. One gets a seatbelt, and the other one does not. But Brantley is going to show you an object in motion stays in motion.
Hi, I'm Brantley. I'm in kindergarten with Miss Gideon. Objects in motion stays in motion. Here we go.
Whoa. Okay. I love Brantley. He's such a great kid. So what had happened in this case, the object in motion stayed in motion unless an unbalanced force acted on it. So my remote control car stays in motion until it gets to the wood blocks, the wall. It stops its motion. That wood block is an unbalanced force because it made it stop. However, the egg wants to continue in that forward motion. So we'll watch one more time. His seatbeltless egg. Okay, so we can also look at this and compare it to real life. If you have a fast driver in your family and all of a sudden something has them stop, okay, they're in a car and we need to quickly stop, what do you notice in the car? If you're wearing your seatbelt, you're this egg right here, and it pushes on it. The unbalanced force is now my seatbelt protecting me and keeping me where I belong, but you can feel the inertia continuing in the same direction. If you're not wearing your seatbelt and you're in the back seat, you probably just hit your head on the front seat. So that would be egg number one over here. It continues in that motion. The object in motion stays in motion. The second part, sorry. No, I want to skip to the next slide. The second part of an object in motion stays in motion is an object at rest stays at rest. All right, so in the beginning it just said they want to continue doing what they're doing. This is another way of wording it, and most students are more familiar with it this way. So Miss Whitney is going to show us an object at rest stays at rest.
And I'm in kindergarten, and my teacher's name is Miss Rosanna. Object at rest stays at rest. Now we're going to pulleys. See, they all follow each other, and let's see if they do.
That was awesome. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, Miss Whitney. That was awesome. So she shows an object at rest stays at rest. Explain to me how that's an object at rest. Okay, we had the cups and we had the paper, and she pulled the paper out. The object at rest stays at rest. What was the object at rest? Was the cups. But did they stay at rest? Are they still hovering where we left them? No. So that means there has to be some sort of unbalanced force acting on them. There has to be an explanation with Newton's laws as to why that motion continues. So let's think about what is the motion or the unbalanced force that's acting on the cups. It's gravity, okay? When I am teaching Newton's laws to the freshmen, they learn that gravity actually has a numerical value to it. It's like saying I drove down the road at 60 miles an hour. Gravity has an acceleration. It's 9.8 meters per second squared. If you want to get ready as an 8th grader to make it up to be a freshman, go ahead and learn 9.8 meters per second squared. Mr. Berg also still knows that. It's a number that just gets stuck in your head. So the gravity is accelerating them downward, but then they continue to stay at rest because of Newton's third law, which we're going to get here in a minute. Okay? So Miss Whitney is showing you an object at rest stays at rest. Sorry, I keep doing that. And So the last part of Newton's first law says unless it's acted on by the unbalanced force. In Whitney's demonstration, the unbalanced force was gravity. The demonstration with Brantley, the unbalanced force could be the seatbelt, it could be the wall. It changes the motion. Everything was going forward until the seatbelt stopped the egg from continuing or the wall stopped the car from continuing. So this last example is some of my zebra friends, Paige and Parker. Paige and Parker are going to show you inertia hats. And they're going to show you all three parts together. But remember, look for the unbalanced force.
Hi, my name is Paige. My name is Parker. We are second graders from Tulsa Elementary. My teacher is Miss Leavers, and my teacher is Miss Mann. These are our inertia hats. An object in rest stays in rest. This object in motion stays in motion.
Okay, so when you see Paige and Parker use their inertia hats, go ahead and skip to the next slide, you're going to notice that they're just balanced on their head. It is literally just a coat hanger with a couple of, it can be wiffle balls in this case, it can be tennis balls, but they're just setting it on their head. So it's balanced. Newton's law says it's going to stay where it's at unless it's unbalanced. So they're just sitting there. So what was the unbalanced force that happened? There was actually two. The unbalanced force at first was a force, a push or a pull. So the kids took that wiffle ball and pushed it. And then it started to spin around their head. And it should continue to spin until poor Parker, his fell off. What caused it to fall off? An unbalanced force. You could talk about gravity is pulling it off. You can say he moved a little bit. It's kind of hard to do that sitting down, so they do it again here in a minute standing up so that you can see it. So there's two different ways to use an inertia hat. But the first one here with Paige, she's going to show you how long these things will continue to spin. Okay, there might be a little bit of friction with her hair. I know Mr. Harshfield talked about friction briefly. Friction is just the resistance to flow. And then Parker is going to do something a little bit different here with his inertia hat. So this is an object in motion stays in motion. Now Parker is going to watch him. Boom, okay? Parker can spin underneath that thing without it moving. It is not moving because there's no unbalanced force. He's very balanced. He takes that turn all the way around and gets it to stay where it's at. So those are all examples of inertia, the tendency to resist change. And I tell kids, if you just want to know the last two words, I feel like you know what inertia is. It's a resistance to change. Do what you're doing and keep doing it until something stops you. And in Newton's laws, it's an unbalanced force. Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you quickly how to make an inertia hat. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a coat hanger, and I started mine already. I use a pair of pliers, and you want to try and straighten it. Well, I'm not doing so hot right now. Straighten it out as much as you possibly can. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you work on it a little bit, especially at the ends. You can see like where it was twisted at the top. I'm not really worried about that too much. But I got hooked in the microphone, so I'm a little worried about that. And then you're going to straighten it out some more. As I was informed earlier, I talk really fast when I'm nervous, so I'm going to try and slow this down just a little bit. Okay, so once you get this inertia hat or the hanger all straightened out as best you can, I'm going quickly, you bend it in half, okay? We want to have a point at the top, and it's going to end up being on the bottom. This is your little fulcrum. And then you flip it upside down, and you're going to bend each side so it kind of has a heart shape to it. And there's a couple different keys to getting this the way you want it. The first part is the attachment for the tennis balls today, or the wiffle balls in the Henderson twins, has to be lower than your fulcrum point here. So I'm going to bend this down just a little bit more. And then you're going to bend the other side. Okay. I just think they're fun. And I think it's a good challenge for people. I not only got videos of the twins, then I got videos of their mom trying it, and then I got videos of their dad trying it. And their dad, if you know him, he is a coach at Claremore, is got a little bit of advantage on the inertia hats here. So, and then all you have to do, I put some holes in these tennis balls ahead of time, is you're going to put them through the tennis ball and just attach it however you want. I thought the wiffle ball was a really good idea because then you didn't have to like damage anything. And when I do this, They should stay. The other thing that's going to happen is you're going to notice, well, in this case, it actually worked out pretty well. Sometimes it'll lean forward or it'll lean backwards. And all you have to do is manipulate this a little bit, bend the arches here a little bit front and back. And it doesn't matter if it's lopsided this way. You just don't want it leaning front or back. Okay, so then I'm going to set it on my head. And hopefully it's going to stay. Keep your chin up. And I just look silly, but that's not unusual. And then you give it a push. And it should spin there. And it should continue to spin until, everyone, unbalanced force. If I tip my head, it's going to fall off the other way. The friction of the air, there's 4 different types of friction. One's called fluid friction, and fluids can be gas or liquid. The fluid friction of the air will slow it down eventually, but that's just I thought that was kind of cool. Little inertia hats. Okay. So, and then Mr. Henderson doesn't have any hair, so he's I'm going to show him because his wife tells us.
Watch out for the back of the chair. Marcus, get on your head.
Region 3 Golf Coach of the Year, guys. Coach Henderson. All right. So he's very excited. I showed that, I'm sure. Earlier, I learned that you got to see the inertia demonstration with the egg, and we'll just talk about it briefly. I can repeat it, but I'm doing the same thing that Mr. Harshfield did. What happens here is should I go ahead and repeat it? I'll just show it really quickly as a demo. Okay. So what you're going to do is you have a cup, and I used a plastic egg because I'm a baby and I don't want to break eggs. Set a plate on there, put a tube on top, and then set your egg on top. And you want to try and have the tube over top of the cup. So what happened earlier with Coach Mr. Harshfield? He pulls the plate, and if I do this well, the egg falls down. Okay, this kind of looks like Whitney's demonstration, but for some reason, the tube didn't fall down. Why did the tube not fall down? Why did it not fall in there? And you can get it to do that, but you have to modify this plate. The plate is the problem. So with my paper plate, there's a little lip on the side. The unbalanced force is it bends it. It's a pull on the tube. And so the egg falls down, but the tube is affected. If you just used a 3x5 card, you could get the tube and the egg to go ahead and fall into the cup. But that's just another example of inertia. The egg's inertia straight down into the cup. All right, Newton's second law. There are other laws. The first one's just my favorite because you can do lots of demos. For Newton's second law, oh, wow, red does not work in here, I've just learned. It's okay. So force is equal to mass times acceleration, and all this says is big objects, meaning they have more mass, not necessarily volume, but more mass, require more force to move with the same acceleration. So the really good examples are the bowling ball versus a ping pong ball. If I give them the same push, the same force, then one should move with a little bit more ease. It should accelerate more. And what I usually tell students to do, draw a line right through this equation. Okay, we have force on one side and mass and acceleration on the other side. If I take two objects that are the same mass, let's take two tennis balls, for example, and I want them to have different accelerations. If I want the increase on this side of my equal sign, I have to increase this side. So if I want a tennis ball to accelerate, I have to give it more force, okay? Opposite of that is if I want it to decelerate. Deceleration is just a negative acceleration. We're slowing it down. Or just have less acceleration. This number has to be smaller. So that means I'm going to use less force to push on it. Okay, so examples of like me trying to move things. If it's smaller, there's going to be an easier amount of, or it's easier to push this. There's going to be less force required than if it's larger to get it to go with the same acceleration. Okay, Newton's third law says that for every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction, okay? And Mr. Harshfield mentioned this. He talked about the rockets. And when a rocket is launching, there's an action-reaction force that's occurring. There's fuel that's burning and heating the air below it, and it pushes. The action is actually the push down. The reaction is the push up. Push and pull. They're going to be a force. So we see this action down and reaction back forward, up. We have the balloons. Mr. Harshfield showed us how that can work. Another demo that you can do with action-reaction in the balloon is just to kind of show that the balloon can be a rocket as well. And so what I did is I took a balloon and I inflated it, and then I made a mess on the table, it looks like. And I'm going to tape a straw to my balloon. And through the tape, before I started, I stuck a piece of fishing line. That is a easy object to come by at my house. Hiya. Okay, so I think I'm okay. Well, we'll find out here in a minute. All right. So, and again, take my straw with fishing line through it, tape it to the top of my balloon. See if I can tape it the right direction because I want it to go that way. All right. And then the other thing I tried to do was I added some flour into the end of this balloon. It's not tied shut, it's just clamped shut. And I hoped that, good news, it works. When you let the air out, that you would see the flour move so you can see the action versus the reaction. Let's try that again. If ever there was a time to make a mess, it is science class. Just enjoy it. All right, so I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not. Yes, Mr. Berg. Oh, okay. So I'm going to let this go, and maybe you'll see the cloud dust come out. Which way is it going to go? Okay. The dust is going to shoot at me. The balloon goes the opposite direction. Reaction. All right. So we've got 3 minutes left. I'm going to recap this, and I'm going to give you some examples of some Earth Day activities that my students did this week. First, Newton's 3 laws. Number 1, object in motion stays in motion. Thank you, Brantley. Object at rest stays at rest. Thank you, Miss Whitney. Unless acted on by an unbalanced force. Thank you, Paige and Parker. Okay, all of those are examples of Newton's first law. So when you get to be a freshman and you have to come up with examples of these, you already know what to do because these kids helped you out. Thank you all, Rogers County. Number 2, acceleration of an object depends on the mass and the force. So if it has more mass, you can affect the force. If it has more force, the acceleration will be affected. And then finally, for every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. I always tell kids at the beginning of Newton's laws, when I get to the 3rd law, if I'm leaning on the wall, technically the wall is leaning back on me. Okay, action, reaction. I'm leaning on it, it's leaning back on me. Okay, so what I'm going to do was just talk a little bit about Earth Day. Earth Day was a little bit different this year. The hashtag that a lot of people were using as science teachers or just community members was Earth Day at Home. And so I challenged my students to 3 different things this week. The first one was I sent them this cartoon out of the Philadelphia Inquirer. The Philadelphia Inquirer posted this on Sunday just to get people talking and thinking. And their job was to write 100 words and tell me what the author was trying to tell the world. It says we've got less industrial pollution, there's less air pollution from cars, noise pollution at airports, litter on the streets, and all it took was a global pandemic to shut it down. I think probably a lot of people have seen like wildlife articles on the news and how they're coming into urban areas. There was a big article about how the sea turtle hatchings this year are just way above anything we've seen in a long time because the beaches are uninhabited. There's a lot of positives that come out of it. Some of the things my students mentioned was, why are they only picking on the United States? Because this is a global issue. Number 2, some of the things that they talked about were the sarcasm that goes into that, and sometimes sarcasm is effective in just making a point. You don't have to agree with it, but it was just, what is he trying to point out? And I think the idea is if we could just be a little bit more conscious. This is like a whole pause for the planet. What can we do differently? Okay, a lot of people may go back to living their normal lives, and there's so many great things that we'll be able to do. I'm excited to get back to church. I'm excited to see my students again in the fall. But there's a lot of things that maybe we just need to think about changing and what's bettering for all of us, okay? I have a really big issue with global warming. I'm not going to get into it too much, but I worry about the fact that they say like polar bears will be extinct within my lifetime and what future generations and what that's going to do for a lot of the ripple down effect in biology. We could talk about that as well. So then the second activity that they had to do for me was an action activity. And they became fairly clever. There was 4 different options for them, so I'm going to show you some of the options. They all had. Option number 1 was protect the planet. Haley said I could share this with you. Her analysis just said for for my Earth Day activity, I went and picked up trash on the side of the road. I went by my house, and there was surprisingly a lot of trash. Not only was there trash, but a lot of glass and can bottles. All of these things are now in places they belong, like the trash. Right now, recycling is not really an option because they've shut down recycling areas, but she has cleaned up her environment for the planet. Yes, sir. Okay, one more. Haley and Hannah are sisters. I have both of them in class. They rode their bikes to the lake. I told them they could run for clean air. It's a big marathon that they have in Philly, but they could walk or they could ride their bikes. So they knocked out 2. They went ahead and rode their bikes to Claremore Lake instead of driving. And it said there's a lot more trash than we expected, which is sad because it's pretty out there. There was enough for us to fill this whole bag we brought. They didn't expect to find that much. And the final one I have here was that they were allowed to draw or create an artistic option. It just says #nature is beautiful. So Lynn's is creating a poster to mention that it was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, as well as just you can be helpful at home. So many different options out there. I hope that you think about some changes that you could make that could better our planet. Guys, thank you so much. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Thursday.